Biological diversity and biological invasions. What is biological diversity? Biological diversity is the number of species or genetic types within an area. A species are all individuals that are capable of interbreeding and having fertile offspring. Why do people value biodiversity? In this image we have a lion and there's a group of people in an African safari. It's a photo safari. The value of biodiversity. There are 9 primary reasons people value biodiversity, and there are probably many more. First is utilitarian, public service, ecological reasons, moral reasons, theological reasons, aesthetic reasons, recreational, spiritual, and creative. Biological diversity involves genetic diversity, habitat diversity, and species diversity. Genetic diversity, the total number of genetic characteristics of a specific species, the total number of active genes within a set of chromosomes. Habitat diversity, are the different kinds of habitats in a given unit area. In this example, we have a canopy of trees. We have brush areas. We have understory ground covers, and we have a pond. And we have rocks and logs. Species diversity, species richness, the total number of species in a given area. Species evenness, the relative abundance of species. Species dominance, the most abundant of the species. The number of species on Earth, 1.5 million species have been named. Some estimates conclude there are over 3 million species. Some biologists believe the number is much larger. Biological evolution has 4 key processes: mutations, natural selection, migration and geographic isolation, and genetic drift. Mutation, changes in genes which cause coding errors. Each gene contains a single piece of inherited information. The total information makes the genotype of the individual or group. In this example, we have a lamb. If you notice, rather than having 4 legs, it actually has 5 legs. That would be a mutation or a coding area in its genes. Natural selection. Certain changes will make some individuals more successful in their environment. The successful individuals will survive and have babies, and the genes will be passed on. In this example, we have a giraffe. Giraffes browse from trees, and if you notice, they are designed to be able to reach tall trees to browse, which makes them successful in their specialized habitat. Migration and geographic isolation. Migration is the movement of a species is important in the evolutionary process over time. Adaptive radiation. Darwin's finches flew to the Galapagos Islands from the mainland of South America and then radiated out to the different islands. Each island had a different ecosystem, and those specific finches on each island adapted to the specific ecosystem. Geographic isolation. Each isolated group evolves different adaptations depending on the characteristics of the island. These are 2 finches. One way you recognize finches is some finches have very large seed-eating beaks. You can tell this particular set of finches are seed eaters because of the size of their beaks. Genetic drift, or changes in the frequency of a gene in a population, which is due not to mutation, selection, or migration, but simply due to chance. Biological evolution as a kind of game. Biological diversity is always changing. Some species evolve and some become extinct. Specific adaptation has no rules. Complexity is one characteristic of nature. Species and populations become geographically isolated. They experience the founder effect and genetic drift. Species must evolve fast enough to keep up with changes in the environment. Competition in ecological niches. In this example, we have bighorn sheep that are fighting during a rut. Usually these type of fights are to control a harem of females. The competitive exclusion principle. Two species have exactly the same requirements, cannot coexist in exactly the same habitat. In other words, complete competitors cannot coexist. One example are the gray squirrels and red squirrels in Great Britain. Gray squirrels were introduced. Niches, how species coexist. The ecological niche principle explains how so many species coexist. Two complete competitors can survive in a complex environment because they have the same ecologically functional niche. They eat the same thing, but they have different habitats. In other words, one may prefer moist to dry substrate. And one example is the wheat beetles. Measuring niches. Fundamental temperature niche would be the temperature in which a species has no competition. A realized temperature niche is a set of temperatures in which species can coexist. A practical implication. If we want to conserve a species in its native habitat, we must make sure that all the requirements of its niche are present. In this example, we have a coral reef, and coral reefs are very complex ecosystems, and a lot of them are in trouble right now because of global warming. The coral's becoming bleached, and it's affecting the entire ecosystem. Symbiosis. Symbiosis are lifelong relationships with other organisms. Can you see the symbiotic relationship here? Here we have a sloth, and we have the moss growing on the sloth. It actually aids in hiding the sloth. So the sloth benefits and the moss has a home to grow on. Symbiosis. There are three types of symbiotic relationships. There's parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism. Do you recognize this organism? This is a flea. Symbiont. Each partner in a symbiotic relationship. In an adult, approximately 3% of our total body mass are non-human organisms. So in my case, I weigh 200 pounds. So 3% of my total body mass, or 6 pounds of my total body mass, would be non-human microorganisms. Obligate symbionts. Organisms which require another organism for survival. An example would be the relationship between reindeer and the anaerobic bacteria within the ruminant or reindeer's gut. Ruminants are organisms that have multiple stomachs. A broader view of symbiosis. Symbiosis also includes social and behavioral relationships, like the relationship between dogs and humans. The practical implication. The attempt to save a single species leads us to conserve a group of species because of the interconnectivity of symbiotic relationships. Predation and parasitism. Predation. When an organism or predator feeds on other live organisms, prey, usually of another species. In this example, we have a shark feeding on a seal. Parasitism. When an organism lives on or within the other and depends on it for existence. The parasite does not help the host and in many cases actually harms it. A Practical implication. Predators and prey influence diversity and often increase the diversity. How geology and geography affect biological diversity. Greater diversity occurs at lower, more tropical latitudes compared to more polar latitudes. Some habitats harbor fewer species because they are stressful to life. Here we have different variations of plant species. Wallace's realms, biotic provinces. Biotic province is a region inhabited by a characteristic set of species, bounded by barriers that prevent the spread of those distinctive kinds of life. Barriers could be geographic, they could be climate, or other types of barriers. Biogeography, the geographic distribution of species. Biomes, a kind of ecosystem, desert, tropical rainforest, grassland. The same kind of biome can occur on different continents because similar environments provide similar opportunities for life. The rule of climactic similarity demonstrates the close relationship between the environment and the kind of life it supports. Similar environments lead to the evolution of organisms that are similar in form and function, but not necessarily similar in genetic heritage or internal makeup. In this example, we have a Tasmanian wolf, which filled the same niche as North American wolves, but was a totally different organism. It actually had a pouch, so it was not related to the timber wolves. Convergent evolution, the process by which organisms evolve to possess similar outward characteristics because they're exposed to similar stressors. An example is the Joshua tree of California compared to the Euphorbia tree of Africa. These trees have similar outward characteristics, live in similar climates, but are unrelated. Divergent evolution. A large flightless bird was the ancestor of modern flightless birds. The ostrich in Africa, the rhea in South America, and the emu in Australia evolved different characteristics but came from the same ancestor. Invasions of invasive species in island biogeography. Do you recognize the migratory species here? This is a coconut. Theory of island biogeography. Islands have fewer species than continents. New species come from migration to the island and evolution on the island. The smaller the island, the fewer the species. The farther the island is from the mainland, the fewer the species. Ecological islands are small habitats separated from a major habitat of the same kind. An example would be the islands on a freeway. Oftentimes they have organisms that have lived there for a period of time and they cannot leave the island because they will be hit by cars. So they actually have their own ecosystem on the island. Biogeography and people. Biological invasions can increase specific species diversification as extinctions are occurring. Because Europe has east-west mountain ranges, the ice ages caused massive extinctions with limited migration of species resulting. Video invasive species. So there are benefits and there is damage caused by biological invasions. The benefits are species diversification. The damage are it can damage the they can compete with the local species. Why invasive species are a serious problem today. The ease of travel has led to a huge increase in introductions of invasive species. In the US, 69,000 cases of invasive species were documented, 42,000 of the cases within airports.